Hello everyone, thank you for being back. It is my true honor to present today and introduce this session on AI for Europe, a critical need for today and tomorrow. It will be moderated by our very own Professor Gregory Lewkowicz from FARI, also one of our directors in charge of the services. He's a professor and director of the Global Law Program at the Perelman Center at the Université Libre de Bruxelles. He leads the Smart Law Hub at the Perelman Center, focusing on AI's impact on law and society. He advises the Brussels Bar and has directed multiple legal technical initiatives and is also very interested in the teaching component. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm really happy to start this session on AI for Europe, critical needs for today and tomorrow. And I would like first to introduce the different speakers of today. So on my right, I have Holger, who is an Alexander von Humboldt professor in AI, co-founder and chair of the board of CAIRNE, co-chair of the board of directors of the AI Center at Université. Then we have Martin Canter. Martin Canter is a PhD in science, FARI AI expert, and he leads the Smart Region Hub team in Brussels with a focus on digital twins and AI regulatory sandbox. Thank you for joining. On my left side, I have the pleasure to introduce you Marina. Marina is a professor of private law at the Université Côte d'Azur in France and director of the 3IA chair in law and artificial intelligence. And finally, we have the pleasure to welcome Alexandre Moltzau, policy officer of the European AI Office. So the idea of this panel is to address two broad issues. The one is the opportunities of AI for Europe, or maybe the missing opportunities. Then we will have some discussion for sure about that. And we will progressively move from this question of potential for innovation to the question of regulation. You know very well that in Europe we are quite in advance regarding regulation of artificial intelligence, and we will try to discuss with during this panel how to make regulation and innovation working together. So I will first give the floor to Professor Holger. Thank you for joining. You have the floor.
All right. It's truly a pleasure to be here in this beautiful room with all of you today. It's great. The thing I want to talk about is the importance of being earnest. Earnest as in truthful, in looking at the things the way they really are. And I want to do this in the context of the future of AI made in Europe. So I'm not sure how many of you have come across this quote before. I've used it in talks now for a few years, actually. Artificial intelligence is the future, not only for Europe, but for all humankind. It comes with colossal opportunities, but also threats that are difficult to predict. Whoever becomes the leader in this sphere will become the ruler of the world. Now, the original is not quite like that. It talks about Russia, not about Europe. And this is actually something that Vladimir Putin has said in September 2017, before the European Commission and European member states actually started seriously looking into any kind of AI strategy. So Mr. Putin, whatever we think of him, probably nothing too good, was pretty far-sighted here, right? And saw things that took the rest of us maybe a little longer. Now, of course, recently, we've had a bit of a rude awakening, at least those of us who, like me, thought that things would be okay. Actually, they're not okay, quite the contrary. As a result of the re-election of Donald Trump, I think we're now looking at a world where Europe is more isolated than it has been for many decades, and where Mr. Putin will doubtlessly be emboldened to assert his rulership of the world. Politico has recently titled here that Trump's cabinet picks not only trigger unease in Europe, but they're actually terrifying, right? And if you look at the people who will actually wield power in the United States, it is really disturbing. There's no way of looking at this in any other way. And here is what the Parlement building looked like a few weeks into the first term of the von der Leyen Commission. You can read this, right? In 3 languages for a more ambitious union. It's always good to be more ambitious, but let me be very clear. In terms of AI, the first von der Leyen Commission has not delivered, and the second von der Leyen Commission, I think, is about to not make things a whole lot better. So therefore, I think it's about high time that we look at what I would call some inconvenient truths. The first of these inconvenient truths is that AI is, of course, beginning right now, as we speak, to drive progress in all of science and engineering, in all these disciplines, right? And therefore also in the industries that are driven by these disciplines, and also in public administration. I think that's pretty widely accepted, right? AI is also the key to dealing with demographic changes that will lead to major labor shortages in the workforce. And this is already happening. I'm not sure how much you can feel it in Belgium. Certainly just on the other side of the border in Germany, we feel that very, very much, especially in the public sector. Here is an infographic that shows the root of this problem. That has actually been recently posted by Elon Musk, who didn't make it. He just found it and reinforced it. It actually comes from a reputable source, from the University of Washington, and it shows basically the reproductive number for various European states. And as you can see here, Belgium is at 1.53. To maintain population, aside from immigration, of course, you need 2.1. So you can see that everywhere on this map, we are way below 2.1. So the workforce is necessarily shrinking. And that means 2 things. Either we're going to solve this problem through immigration, which I don't think there's much of an appetite for currently, or we're going to solve this problem by just being poorer as a result. Well, there is a third solution, which is that we're going to automate our way out of it, and that's actually where AI can enter the picture. So let's continue with the inconvenient truths. I really think this is the right moment to say, and to say it very clearly, the EU AI strategy has largely failed. It's a failure. It has not produced what it has set out to produce in 2018. AI made in Europe is not globally competitive, and actually, in my expert opinion, never will be if we continue on the current path. Also, there is no non-European company that will provide us with the kind of AI systems that really reflect our values. And the reason for that is quite simple. It's not economically worthwhile doing that. And therefore, AI Act, yes or no, this will simply not happen, right? And then also Europe is drifting currently quite rapidly into deep technological and economical dependence on AI made elsewhere. Mostly in the United States, because China isn't really a good source for this kind of technology for us. So I invite you to reflect on the following questions. Would we feel comfortable relying on non-EU companies alone, not their involvement, but on them alone, to build, maintain, and operate our highway systems, our public transportation systems, our airports, our telecommunication networks, our hospitals, our schools and universities? And I sincerely hope that every single one of you would answer every single one of these questions with no, we should not, and we would not. Right? Certainly not. But AI systems and services will affect all of these sectors and their future. And therefore, and for many other reasons, they should be considered public infrastructure. And that is the reason why we should not allow exclusively non-European entities to control that technology and the way it's being developed and deployed. It's public infrastructure, right? That's also why the public needs to invest into it, just like the public needs to invest into all these other things. Especially, right, those AI systems and services that are used in the public sector. We do not want a public sector, and that for me includes the schools, the hospitals, all these things, the courts, that is dependent on American technology in the day and age of a Trump administration. We do not want this, and in fact, we cannot afford it at all. So AI I think, is key to the future of Europe. The Commission has seen this correctly. But what will this future look like? Let's have a brief look at 3 scenarios. This one I call distant third. It's what happens when we just keep on going, right? And what happens then is that European AI is a distant third to American and Chinese AI. There's a large gap in tech and research capability and a strong dependency on the technology designed and run elsewhere. The top talent will be mostly displaced or working remotely for global tech leaders, anchored mostly in the US because China isn't so attractive for them, right? They might still enjoy the way of life in Brussels and many other great places in Europe, but they will work for American companies, right? And they will also be beholden to these American companies, even if it's their European subsidiaries. And the European subsidiaries, they will mostly focus on compliance with EU rules and regulations, okay? And that's not particularly good for our economy. How do we get there? We basically just hold the course. We do business as usual. We execute the plan as currently conceived by the European Commission and its member states, right? And then what happens is that the developments in Europe are funded through usual mechanisms. Successes mostly benefit non-European entities. And we will have brain drain acquisition and all of these kind of things. Most of our data will be processed in Europe, but used and in fueling technologies outside of Europe, right? That's already happening with the Office software, which is now by default using all the data that you're putting in there to train the AI models, right? So that is happening, and highly asymmetrical data sharing arrangements. And most of the investments made by European companies and the public sector to deploy and leverage AI capabilities will actually benefit companies and economies outside of Europe, mostly the Trump-run United States of America. So that's not a good scenario. Here's scenario B. I call it niches and specialties. It's very much like this distant third scenario, except that here we have islands of European excellence. These tend to be small and highly specialized, maybe AI in manufacturing, maybe AI in public hospitals. But the economic benefits will be very uneven and outweighed by broad dependence on technology made elsewhere still, okay? How do we get there? By doing what lots of industry people tell us currently. We just build on top of fundamental technology made elsewhere. And then basically very similar things will happen that we had on the last slide. We have European investments on AI mostly focused on areas of existing strength and specialization. And most of our data is processed in Europe, but still using and fueling technologies made elsewhere. And we still have highly asymmetric data sharing agreements like we have now. And the investment made by European companies will still only bring limited benefit to Europe, and will be offset by the cost of technology developed elsewhere. And that cost will be rising, right? Trump will not stop at just slapping tariffs on the goods that we want to ship to the United States. We will also have to bleed through the nose for essential services provided by US companies. And then there's scenario A, the one that we all want, where Europe becomes a global leader in AI and the global leader in human-centric, trustworthy AI, where AI research and take capability here is comparable to the US and China, where clear leadership in human-centric, trustworthy AI is rooted in Europe, and where we are strongly committed to AI for good and AI for all, as FARI is, for example, right now at CAIRNE. And that would mean that Europe would be equally attractive to top talent as the US and China. That's, of course, what we want. And how do we get there? We really need broad and large-scale investment through novel instruments and programs. The Commission seems to be quite unwilling and maybe incapable of doing that. We need world-class European capabilities in all crucial areas of AI technologies, including generative AI. We simply need that, right? And we need to be world-leading in about 30 to 50% of these. In this scenario, most of our data will be processed in Europe, but using and fueling technologies made in Europe. And data sharing should happen on a level playing field. That would be good for us. So to wrap this up, I think Europe can actually still become a leader in human-centered, trustworthy AI, but we really need to get our act together. Okay, we really need to act now. And here's what needs to be done. This is my last slide. We need to stop pretending. That's the first thing. We're not okay. The AI ecosystem in Europe is not okay. And under Trump, this will become painfully obvious, except that if we wait until we feel the pain, like with many medical treatments, it's going to be way too late. Then we need to treat the question of AI in Europe with the priority and urgency, and dare I say the earnestness and seriousness that it deserves and requires. And that means that the Commission, who has failed to act on this so far, needs to create an independent agency that does it on their behalf. We need an independent EU-level organization outside of the European Commission to design and deliver an effective AI strategy. That needs to be very much like ESA or CERN, an organization that at the very least listens better to the advice of experts and then has the resources to actually act on this advice decisively. We need to take swift and bold, newsworthy and impactful action to create trustworthy AI systems, including Gen AI. There is an initiative, the so-called moonshot proposal, that is ready to execute. Basically, we need to make sure that EU-made AI systems are used in the public sector of the EU and its member states. Let me be very clear. This would be a great time for the EU to say, as soon as Trump's tariffs come, our public sector will only use European-made AI systems. Can you imagine the boost this would give to European industries making these systems? And it's not rocket science. We can actually do this. We just need to get off our asses. We need to stop pretending we're okay and actually do the thing. And once we do this, we can execute this. And I really want to leave you with this idea. Now is the time that we need to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you for this wake-up call. It's a huge and very inspiring policy program. Not sure that everybody will agree around this this table, well, these two tables, but we will move to address now a little bit more, or focus a little bit more on what is there, and especially what is there in the new regulation of AI in Europe to support innovation. Especially regulatory sandboxes. It is the only measure regarding support for innovation in the AI Act. Martin Canter will present his research on this topic. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thank you, Gregory. So good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you're still awake for the long day that still awaits us. And like Gregory said, I'm going to be speaking mainly for the moment about AI regulatory sandboxes. Which okay, seems to be taking a bit of time to switch. All right. It seems to be off. All right. Sorry about that. Yes. So, going to the AI regulator sandboxing. We have already spoken about it this morning. It has been mentioned a couple of times during the keynotes at different conferences, also on the topic from the from the EU Commission. And it's, to be honest, quite a hot topic because it's still complex to put in place. A lot of people are trying to do it. It can have a lot of benefit, but it's not easy to accomplish. So first, I want to give a couple of examples to explain what an AI regulatory sandbox actually is or can do through use cases. So a couple of examples in the past have been, for example, in Belgium. I think that a lot of you living in the country know about the deceased Jean-Luc Dehaene, the Prime Minister of Belgium, a long time ago. And Gen AI was used a couple of times, either in Belgium by his former political party to make him speak in recent elections, or for example in Switzerland, where someone actually took their political opponent's image and made them also say something that was actually not true and against their own, interest. The thing is that, technically speaking, those were not really forbidden yet as practices. And so the question that we can raise is, what can you actually do to make sure that when new technologies come on the market, and especially with regards to AI innovation, that new people find new ways of using AI, how can we control it and make sure that we are catching up with the legal aspect of it while still maintaining good balance with innovation? And so the initial idea of AI regulatory sandboxes comes from the 2008 economic crisis. It was an idea that emerged in the UK, where they thought, okay, well, something is happening here. People are playing with new financial technologies and with new products. How do we make sure that instead of crashing the economy again, we can take those ideas, those products, we can test them before putting them on the market to make sure that we can study them, we can validate them, and they're not going to be dangerous on the long term with having unintended effects. It was initially applied for the fintech sector, and it was afterwards shared in multiple domains and forms. So nowadays we see a lot of sandboxes anywhere around the world. It can be for the fintech, it can be for agriculture, it can be just for technologies in general, or here what concerns us with the AI Act is around AI. So a couple of examples that I can also give is in Belgium. There were a couple of projects in the past that were looking at ANPR cameras. So those are automated number plate recognition cameras. We see them a lot just on the roads. They can be used to do a lot of stuff, checking, well, counting cars and stuff like that. And there was a project where they wanted to use those cameras to detect whether someone is using the mobile phone on, while driving. We can all agree that this is not really something that's too problematic. In terms of data privacy, you can easily obfuscate the people driving or the people in the car itself to just detect whether someone is driving while on the phone or not. The problem is that in Belgium, the legal framework for that is very specific. It says that only the police can access those images and not anybody else, which means that even if it can actually be done in other countries in Europe, in Belgium itself it cannot be applied because the legal framework is not adapted. And so the question that we raise is, how can we make sure that looking at those innovations, we can update the legal framework to make it adapted to the new ideas that come with AI. Another example would be, it was a project that also happened in Brussels, but a partnership from the University of Lucelle, so the Leuven in France, French, looking at Brussels, and they wanted to do a socio-economical simulation of the region of Brussels by, instead of just looking at the average population, by looking at each individual specifically, collecting their data, and then seeing how different policy making can affect their lives by changing, for example, the amount of taxes, but also giving them some fiscal incentives. And since, well, it's quite sensitive data, instead of using the normal data, they completely created a fake data set and then used that one to simulate the city of Brussels. And so here we have an example of actually a good idea that becomes compliant with with the regulation, but at the same time still allows you to innovate and do stuff in a smart and, well, trustworthy way. And so here, the takeaway is mainly that on first hand, we want to adapt inadequate legislation to be able to promote innovation. On the second hand, we also want to share good practices about what can you do when you're struggling with difficult use cases to make sure that you can still innovate in a proper way. And so, going into a bit more technical concepts, the AI regulatory sandboxes are a bit defined in the AI Act. They're basically a controlled environment that fosters innovation, and that aims at facilitating the development, training, testing, and validation of innovative AI systems for a limited time before being placed on the market, pursuant only to a specific sandbox plan. That's an agreement between the providers or prospective providers of AI and the competent authority that supervises them. And such sandboxes may also include testing in a real-world condition supervised therein. So basically the idea is that we have an agreement to test AI, to do something with AI, to promote innovation, but still in a controlled environment where we can test it together between the companies, the innovators, and the regulators that will both learn together. It can be about something is wrong here. We should not be able to do that, so the regulator will regulate that because it's dangerous before it happens. I think that we can also all think about the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which was not really too illegal, but which is really a bad idea to try to start influencing elections through chatbots online. Well, it still happens, but it should not. So this type of project basically should be tested first before we can do that. The objective of the sandbox are also really specific. It's first to improve legal certainty. So it's also an innovation and support innovation method to be able to teach companies, and most of the time in Europe that would be SMEs. We can compare that with the big tech companies in the US or the rather state-driven initiatives in China. In Europe, most of the work is actually done by small and medium companies that don't always have the legal support to know exactly how they should apply the legal framework or how they should be respecting the law and how to do that in practice. There is a difference between reading a legal text and for an AI developer on how to implement it in practice. And so for that, we also want to share the best practices about, okay, what can we do to make sure that it's easy for everybody to understand how they should be compliant and how to do that. It's also to foster innovation and to contribute to evidence-based regulatory learning. So there's a difference between making a law and then see it actually applied afterwards. I think that we all want explainability or fairness, but how do you apply that in practice? I can cite you 30, 40, 50 different measures of fairness. Which one should I be taking? This is a little bit difficult. And then finally, is to facilitate and accelerate the access to the union of market for AI systems. So basically, and I'm going to show that afterwards, the AI regulatory sandbox itself will be on a national level a part of the ecosystem that supports innovation for European companies. So in practice, what do they offer? Well, you've got a couple of notions that can be differentiated. The first one is a basic service. A simple sandbox should at least give you risk assessment and some compliance coaching. You can go there, ask questions, and how should I be compliant? Is my use case even compliant? Well, what should I comply with, and how can I make it compliant? The second bit is the extensive service. So basically there you start having support to, if you have a specific question, you want access to a data set to test your use case, maybe we can direct you towards the TEF, so the Test and Experimentation Facility, or the European Digital Innovation Hubs, the EDIs, and so on. And then finally the full service, which is also something that's difficult to put in place, because for that you need a specific regulatory framework in each member state to do that, is the liability limitation, where when you're testing with a regulator, you can actually say, well, this legal aspect we're going to consider that a little bit differently, and we'll see what happens. So that's really something specific that still needs to be developed in Belgium. It already exists in some other countries. I think that there is a concept of regular zones, like they call it in Dutch in Flanders, but not yet on the Belgian level fully. And for that, then all the stakeholders that need to be involved in the regulatory sandboxes are the legal experts, technical experts, business advisors, and the authorities and the regulators and the innovators themselves. So you've got a lot of people around the table that are just going to be looking at AI and how do we do that in practice, and how do we make sure that we can do it in a safe way while promoting innovation. So to support, well, to make it a little bit more visible in a practical way, I've laid out here the procedure basically that we need to follow. So simple stuff would be, you go on the portal, you apply, you can ask simple questions if you want. If you don't have a complex use case but just one quick question, it's easier to do. Then you can apply to the regulatory sandbox, you can prepare then your full use case, start interacting with the regulators, go through interviews, and then actually perform the testing. Wherever the testing happens, that's something else. It can be in different places. If you want the tester to have access to your data with the regulator, maybe you don't have data yet, or maybe your data is proprietary and you want to test it on your own system. There is an agreement that can be done. Then it gets evaluated, and then you've got a follow-up about, okay, well, what have you learned about it? And mostly then also providing then feedback to the AI office, to the top-level regulator that can share that knowledge on the EU level. And so the AI regulatory sandbox itself should not be seen as only innovator or regulator, but should actually be in the middle, trying to keep the balance between both of them. We want to promote innovation, but we want to do it in a safe way, and we want to help the regulator to do it efficiently. And so to replace the regulatory sandbox a bit in the EU ecosystem, well, you've got the EU AI board, European Commission, you've got those cross-border AI sandboxes, a couple of national AI market surveillance authorities that are going to be on each member state level doing that. And then on the side, you've got those standard organizations, the EDIs, the ecosystem of AI and networks, the research institute and civil society like FARI, for instance, and then a couple of, well, local testbeds, test and experimentation facility, data spaces, and so on. So all those elements together should be working, sometimes taken separately depending on what you need, and sometimes combined together to help the innovators do something. Because in the end, without companies using that, well, the whole ecosystem is pointless. To give also a bit of an idea of what's happening right now, the AI Act itself entered into force in August, and you've got 24 months to comply with the regulation to implement AI regulatory sandboxes in each member state. At least they need one national level AI sandbox. Whatever happens afterwards on a more local level can also be done, but they need at least on the national level. A couple of countries have taken a head start, like the Netherlands or Sweden. Spain also funded a pilot project by the European Commission that was really with a limited time frame. So stuff is going on. We're actually hosting tomorrow at FARI a workshop on that topic with a lot of experts that are actively contributing to the problem and trying to build it themselves to see what are the good practices. For instance, if you set up a sandbox, how can you make sure that you reach the correct SMEs, and that the SMEs know that they can reach out to you to participate to the sandbox? And what would be a good procedure for the sandbox actually, well, for the SMEs to access the sandbox? Who will fund that? What kind of procedure can we put in place? So that whole stuff for the moment is still being discussed. It's really a co-creation process that we have with multiple partners, both in Europe and on the EU level directly. So thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Martin, for this quite complete presentation of the question of regulatory sandbox and how they can contribute to a more innovative environment. Of course, some critics may say it's kind of a lot of administration for having test and experience center in Europe and for fostering trustworthy AI. But that we will probably discuss a little bit later during this panel. And now we have the pleasure to have Marina Teller. It will be, I think, that will present, I think, some ideas that are kind of would counterbalance the presentation of Holger regarding the role of regulation and potentially supporting part of the European journey on AI regulation. Marina Teller, you have the floor.
Thank you, Gregory. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much for having me today for this meeting. I am the lower in the group with the difficult task to discuss about law, regulation of innovation, and we know that this relationship between regulation and innovation, especially with AI developers, is basically not what we would call a love story. But anyway, I would like to discuss not all the details of the EU Act, of the regulation about AI system, but instead I'd rather have a discussion, a conversation with you about the potential direction we might take moving forward. And I have structured my presentation today in two parts. First, I start by clearing up some, I would say, some common misconception about AI regulation, that is to say, ideas that I think are important to address right now from the start. And then in the second part of my talk, I will highlight a few key concepts for creating a legal framework that seems to me maybe more relevant or even forward-looking for the future. Regulating AI is not necessary, it's not an option, it's essential, but it is also incredibly complex, and the regulation has sparked a lot of debate. We know that many experts are still discussing how best to implement the AI Act, and we could easily spend hours debating whether this approach is effective or whether it actually achieves its objectives. What is clear, though, is that regulating AI presents significant challenges, and especially in democratic society. And these challenges go beyond just technical issues like the black box problem, like algorithmic bias, and of course we have to face these issues. But the challenges go deeper, touching on fundamental societal and political questions. The question in the title of his talk is intentionally provocative. And Holger at the beginning wanted to be a little spicy. It was its wording, so I think we need to be a little bit provocative. The question is, are we on the wrong track? It is an open question. That means that myself, I don't have a definitive answer. But if we want to try all together to think about this question, it is important first to address some common misconceptions that tend to cloud the conversation about AI and regulation. The first and perhaps the most widespread misconception is that regulation hinders innovation. And you've probably heard the saying that the US creates innovation, China imitates it, and the EU regulates it. This view is popular, but it doesn't fully hold up when we consider the evidence, and we take a very good example, if we step aside AI, the example of the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. We remember that at the beginning of the implementation of the GDPR, many critics argued that Europe was making a mistake, that by adopting such a protective framework, It was also creating unnecessary restriction. But over time, the results told a different story. First, companies adapted. They began incorporating data protection by design right from the start of their contractual processes. And it became a standard practice because the GDPR brought legal certainty, and legal certainty is crucial, is essential for the business. Second, we saw a global ripple effect because other regions, including China, California, etc., started adopting similar data protection standards. This phenomenon is very well known as the Brussels effect. Being the first to set the rules, in fact, is a way to win the race to the regulation. It's a way also to shape the condition for accessing the European market. And in the digital economy, where global players like Amazon or Microsoft operate, this kind of influence has far-reaching consequences. Once these companies comply with European standards, those standards often become global norms. And in this way, regulation is not just a tool for control, a tool for annoying industry and big tech company. It is also a strategic mechanism for encouraging and even driving innovation. The second misconception I would like to address is the idea that it would be already too late to regulate AI, that innovation has already advanced so far, too far. And some argue that if Europe imposes restriction, companies will simply move their AI development from Europe to US or China, of course leaving Europe at a competitive disadvantage. Let's take a closer look at that assumption. Rushing to be the most permissive regulator is not always the smartest strategy, and we can just think about social media. It wasn't Chinese or Russian companies that won the race to put into the market social media algorithm. It was clearly Western companies. Algorithm came from the US. Yet, the unintended consequences of this algorithm have profoundly impacted our democracies. Today, governments are struggling to regulate social media platforms because the damage has already been done. And this example shows us something important. It's not in Europe's best interest to be the first to release potential harmful technologies without fully understanding their long-term consequences. And finally, there is a third misconception about European AI regulation. Many people believe that regulation is designed to protect individuals. But if we look closely at the legal basis of the AI Act, it's based on the Article 114 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the EU. This article is focused on the EU market. That is to say that it's very clear this regulation is market-driven. It's not about safeguarding individual rights. So those who think the Act is mainly about protecting individuals are missing the big picture. The real focus is the markets. Now, this realization raises an interesting question for us. Could we approach AI regulation in a way that truly puts individuals at the center? And I think it's one of the scope of the FARI Institute. So those are three key misconceptions about AI regulation, and I think it's important to address them to understand the role of law in shaping AI's future. And this brings us to the real question. How do we create a legal framework for AI that is not just effective, but also forward-looking? It is the second part of my talk. Is it okay, Gregory? I have time? Okay. So to explore that question, what are the potential paths for AI regulation? And first, we need to acknowledge something important, maybe obvious but important. AI is unlike any innovation we've encountered before. Its potential for autonomous decision-making brings entirely new challenges. There is a common argument that every innovation eventually finds its regulatory framework, and history seems to support this idea. Revolutionary technologies like electricity, radio engine, atom, and so on were eventually brought under legal control. And following that logic, some might say, well, we don't need more rules, we don't need a specific legal framework for AI, and after all, we already have strong laws like the GDPR, the Data Act, the Digital Markets Act, the Digital Services Act, the Digital Operational Resilience Act, and so on, and so many regulations. But I believe that AI is different. Because it is unprecedented in its capacity to make autonomous decisions. Think about how social media algorithms decide what next video you will see on TikTok and so on and so on. It's only about decision making. And this is just scratching the surface of its potential. This observation raises a challenging question. Are we truly capable of regulating innovation that go beyond anything we have known before? Because this is basically the point. And to talk about this new innovation, I like to refer to this as total innovation. It is a term I recently discussed with my colleague and friend Gregory Lewkowicz. Total innovation has some unique characteristics. First, they are systemic. For example, if a major company like Google or Microsoft are compromised, of course, it will have global consequences. Second, this innovation blurs the line between private companies and public governance. Big tech companies now hold power that is sometimes greater than many of government, and this makes regulating total innovation especially challenging. Current frameworks, such as the risk-based approach in the AI Act, may not be sufficient. I recall that the AI Act's initial framework is inspired by the regulation of products or medical devices and is focused on a pre-market risk assessment. But I think that we cannot regulate an AI system the same way we would regulate just another consumer product, like a toaster or a microwave, simply by relying on a European marking. If we don't see that point, we may miss a crucial point, the question of the social acceptability of AI system. And if we want AI to be both desirable and widely accepted, we need to move beyond just managing risk. We should aim for a benefit-oriented approach, not only a risk-based approach, but a benefit-based approach. In short, we need to shift, to move from simply minimizing risk to maximizing the societal benefit of AI. And that means also, for us lawyers, that we have to rethink our legal standards, our expectation. We have to be 2 minutes, of course. We have to be imaginative, and we know that it's not exactly what we are known for as lawyers. So, in my 2 minutes to wrap this talk, I just would like to say that some key points must be addressed. First, the question not only about transparency, but also the question of conflict of interest And it took major scandal in accounting with, for instance, the Enron fraud in the early 2000s to understand that it is very important to be sure that big tech companies are not on both sides of the relationship. That is to say, you can monitor, develop, and sell a product, and on the other side, you sell the same product to the entity who will control the private actor. The question of the conflict of interest is crucial. And in the last minute for my closing thoughts, I would say that the path AI takes will depend on its social acceptability, which is why policymakers must fully understand its total impact. Because what we are facing now with AI is probably one of the very tricky and complex challenge we have to face as lawyers. The challenge is how addresses the social and political dimension of innovation proactively and not reactively. I recall this the saying of Mireille Hildebrand this morning. She says the question zero, this is the question zero, because the next major disruptive innovation will be quantum computing, and maybe that we have to take inspiration of the AI regulation to avoid all the mistakes we did in the AI regulation when we will have to regulate quantum technologies. Thank you, Gregory.
Thank you, Marina. I think you bring a lot of very key questions, and we will have the answers to all our questions because we don't know as the regulator, Alex Moltzau, that you have a lot on your plate. So how do you see the debate the different presentation that were done so far, and how do you see the prospects of AI regulation in Europe against innovation, pro-innovation, in the middle? So you have the floor.
Yes, so I will likely discuss that with you, and I will try to answer some of these questions. But first I would really like to say how wonderful of an event this is, and I just also want to thank the co-directors and everyone that's been working so hard to put this together today. And I think, I will sort of say this, but my views will not represent the official position of the European Commission, etc. But I do believe personally that research community and the scientific community is really the heart of the field of AI. And I do believe very strongly that this is more important than ever. And you know, I do think that there are a range of things that are quite complex, but that we appreciate have some degree of safety. Some of you might have traveled with, an airplane, flew here. That's extremely complex. I mean, even mobile phones, etc., and these platforms. These are things that we try to understand. Although they are complex, it does not mean that we want to try to create rules of the road, to make sure that this is safe for our citizens, to make sure this is safe for children, and like a range of users really, that we are directly seeing impact in the citizens of Europe right now, today, as we speak. This is an ongoing issue. But we also want to make sure that we are one of the leading regions of the world, if not the legion, and you made some interesting scenarios, Holger. So I think it's fair to say that although I'm acting and I'm working, in the AI office with these wonderful people, I'm a seconded national expert. So that means I am sent from the Ministry of Digitalization and Governance in Norway for 2 to 4 years to the AI office. So I have to think about these concerns when I get back in 2 to 4 years as well, because we are creating a framework, creating ways of working together in Europe, and building governance. And it's fair to say that who's the responsible person for AI, in Norway, or in Belgium, or have we had these responsible people so clearly designated? And honestly, I have worked with AI policy at the Norwegian Artificial Intelligence Research Consortium for 5 years prior to joining the AI office, and I don't necessarily think that is so clear. And I do believe it is a strength in Europe that we are well coordinated, that we really think about how to build this in Europe, how to make sure that we build a safe environment for AI in Europe. So what does the AI office look like? And my colleague Cecilia was here earlier today, and she explains part of what we do, and I just thought to kind of give you a little bit of an overview of how the AI office is structured now. So here on this slide, you can see these units, and as you probably understand, it is within the European Commission now. It's in DG Connect. It's in Directorate A. We have, these different areas. A1, that was Cecilia, is the head of unit for that A1. And A2, where I work, AI Regulation and Compliance, we work with the AI Act. But on the same floors, we have these kind of people with the technical backgrounds that are coming in now, 10, 15, soon there will be more, that are specifically working to think about how these things work in practice. And in A4, which is, on the same floors, they are working with the European Digital Innovation Hub, the test and experimentation facilities, various mechanisms to think about how we work with companies in Europe. And of course, we have to work to improve those. We have to work to make sure we are more coordinated, but at least understand that although this, as described, is very oriented toward product safety, it is also the intention of the European Commission that this creates an environment for innovation in Europe. So, we're still trying to figure this out. The AI office went live the 17th of June, so it is like a new structure, but I can assure you that my colleagues are working very hard on this. And this is also a commission slide, so now you kind of see at least some kind of points there to sort of like think about how does these policy mechanisms consider, because you have the AI office, yes, the 140 people working here in Brussels and in Luxembourg. But you also have the AI board comprising of the member states, and underneath this you will have subgroups. So in a way, this is extremely interesting because member states now are being asked to nominate people to these subgroups within different areas. And that is really, it's helpful, because if we are more coordinated in Europe, I think that's a strength, as I said previously. But we have to make sure that we also try to implement, that we also try to make sure that compute is accessible. And I think this will also maybe be part of our discussion, I hope. But the AI Factories is also an initiative that within the first 100 days, they will attempt to address in this new commission. And the Commissioner designate Virkkunen, it will be really exciting to see kind of like how the leadership will be in the time to come as well, with all these different mechanisms. And as was mentioned, AI Act is not the only act. We have the Digital Services Act, we have Data Governance Act, we have various mechanisms to think about platforms or think about AI. But also, it's also important to mention that this is an ongoing international collaboration, and we are internationally collaborating on this AI safety topic. So this very week, on Friday, the AI safety unit will be meeting up with the other environments for AI safety around the world, and they have kind of very concrete discussions with action points. So we are not on the lazy side here when it comes to international collaboration, but in effect, we are the only regulatory body kind of very clearly demarcated, at least, that could be said for this discussion. Although we have the different safety institutes, we have some real responsibility, and we're working on a code of practice as well, which I will get back to. So what do I do in the AI office? I've been working a bit on this AI Pact, this proactive implementation. So 114 companies, including OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, signed that they will proactively implement the AI Act. And they will report on this in 12 months. So all these companies, at least from around the world, they have signed that they will sort of proactively implement. And we will also discuss with these companies how we can do this in a safe way. Because we see that AI is is being implemented, and it's in public sector, but it's also on apps for children like My AI from Snapchat, and so what kind of safety measures are they working on? What kind of safety measures are they implementing to make sure that the type of conversations that are being had are safe for different groups? So you have probably seen this pyramid before, but I would also add to this pyramid and say that we also have this work on these general purpose AI models. And the pact has 100 signatories. I think there are around 130, 140 signatories now. So we also have companies signing on, and we also hold seminars and webinars for European companies to share sort of like how they can approach the AI Act, but also to include them the other way around, to keep an open dialogue with companies around Europe, but around the world. So this is important to note because yes, we have the AI Act, but there is a runway now of implementation, and we still are working on a lot of these details in the AI Act and like how they're going to be implemented. Because as was mentioned again, this relationship with China and the US, part of it was the backdrop for the AI Act itself. Computer vision was used in the US at some point fairly indiscriminately, right, against certain groups, and that was heavily criticized. We see a lot of surveillance on the other end of the population, and where does Europe stand in this? Like, what kind of society are we? We talk about the World Wide Web that was mentioned earlier today. We talk about what type of innovation happens from Europe. What innovation happens from Europe? And when we put regulation against innovation, is there only one kind of innovation? What kind of social innovation do we see in the European society? What society do we want to live in? And I think that is like a really foundational question that we should ask ourselves. So this, as you can see here, there is a runway, so it's not like the AI Act kicks in and then everything kind of kicks in tomorrow. We also want to make sure that this is an implementation that runs in a safe way and that we include these different actors in the process. And one of the inclusion processes is with the general purpose AI models and the Code of Practice Plenary. And within this, also 1,000 stakeholders are meeting up in different working groups and discussing this. And as you heard from earlier today, that is also representative of a range of different stakeholders. So public interest AI, I believe, also mentioned this code of practice process. So it is to say that we do try to listen. We do our best to listen to the different communities represented, and we try to include these different communities. We have your say processes on documents. The scientific panel, which is one of the mechanisms that we'll get back to. It also has have your say on the implementing act. And these are also some fairly interesting voices, and we will have, I think, an online intervention from Benjio later today. But as you can see, he is also part of this process as one of the chairs of one of the working groups in the Code of Practice. But we have to figure out how to do this. and how is this structured on a national level? As I said, I will be in the AI office for a few years, but then I will come back to the Norwegian state, and then I have to try to figure out how the Norwegian state implements this in practice, how we actually work as a state to try to make sure these things work for our citizens and our companies. So I would really follow this process, and governance bodies need to be designated by 2nd of August 2025. That might sound like it's a little bit away, but as we know, figuring out national level governance is not always that easy. So this is an ongoing discussion that is going on, and extremely important that the scientific community engages with this going forward. So the scientific panel is really one of those kind of working items that at least is a call to action for scientists to get involved and to share their opinions. And I think the importance of this is highly crucial, and we had the first speaker here kind of speaking up and saying kind of like where are we really right now? Because without the scientific community, without the research community, we can easily kind of dream up scenarios of where we are. but the research community and the scientific community, they are really concerned with the empirical situation, what is going on right now. But we have these large models, and as you heard, we are working to figure out ways to do that in practice, the code of practice. But it also has to be said that even if a model is not designated as systemic risk within the AI office, the scientific panel can actually make a qualified alert, can flag systemic risk as well. So the scientific panel is not only there to kind of, oh, it's nice to include researchers and scientists, but yeah. But we can really say that the scientific community has a function and a purpose as well within this context. And of course, you know, there is a lot more we can do beyond the EU AI Act, you know. AI policy has a broader scope, like innovation in AI has a broader scope, but I really do believe that it is important. We try to make sure that fundamental rights are taken into considerations, you know, that we think about when we use AI system in public services, how does this actually work in practice? When we have deployers of AI systems, as was mentioned in another panel here, like the welfare scandal in the Netherlands, or kind of like other ways, we really have to rethink governance. And I also have to say, honestly, that I'm very impressed by how this has shifted kind of the AI governance discussion in certain member states as well. And I think there's a lot of forward-leaning, excellent work that is happening in different member states in Europe. And you know, although we're not successful at everything yet, you know, we also want to be extremely successful at this business company innovation. I do believe that there has been a lot of public sector innovation that we really have to kind of see how works for a citizen in Europe as well going forward. So what is public good and social innovation? Innovation for whom, when, you know, this public sector innovation. If it is that question mark that was mentioned in the beginning, you know, and I do feel that is really important, you know, because I really like that the title actually had a question mark, because we do really have to question this going forward, because we haven't figured it out. And like people that come to me and say that they got everything figured out about AI, you know, I don't believe that's the case right now, honestly. But that really means that every single person in this room has a great responsibility. And the first one, you know, is to engage. Don't stay silent, you know. Raise your voice, and also understand that in the Commission and in these structures, we do really try to listen. We do really try hard to make sure that we take your voice into consideration. And also engage to make Europe a leading region in the world within AI. Because this is something that we have to take on together, and it's really something that we have to explore together, but it has to work, in number 3, for the citizens of Europe. That, you know, I came here to Brussels with my family half a year ago, and from what I have seen in the AI office, these are people that really do care about this, you know, as a foundation of how we live our lives, because it does affect how we live our lives, and we can make a difference. Thank you.
So thank you very much for this presentation and update on what is the AI office and what is basically your plan to deploy the AI Act and the AI policy, the European AI policy. So after this first round of discussion, the idea is to have a more dynamic discussion maybe. And I would like to go back to you after these presentations. What are you? Do you have the impression we are on track? What is missing to be on track? Should we put the AI Act in the garbage or not? Or do we only need money?
I think we're solidly on track for scenario C, distant third. And you know, while I very much appreciate and in fact very much enjoyed the remarks that have been made by all other panelists, I would say this is important work that you're doing, no doubt. I wish to first point out, in a panel of 4, there's only one person who talks a little bit about innovation and actually being capable to build the systems that we need. Everybody else is talking about regulating stuff, right? I don't think we can regulate ourselves out of this mess. I really don't see it. Which is not to say that I think regulation is not valuable. It clearly is. But the balance isn't right. And that's what I would say the Commission has gotten wrong. My second remark is, Alex, you've pointed out, the AI office is a part of DG Connect and actually a part of Directorate A of DG Connect. That is indicative of the importance that the European Union really gives to AI. It is part of one directorate of one DG. We will never get anywhere with this approach. Evidently not. I mean, with all the great work you're doing, maybe you'll get the implementation of the AI Act right, although I think the stars have to align in particularly favorable ways for this to occur, because if I didn't misunderstand, Marina already pointed out, right, the risk-based approach has its appeal, but it doesn't ensure at all that what we get is compatible with our values and promotes social good. It really doesn't, right? We need much more for this. And my final remark is going to be, I mean, let's look at what the Commission is doing on the side of innovation, right? There was one slide of the three of you that talked about this a little bit, and it was the one where you said, where you had AI factories. You didn't mention it, but they were on there. The AI factories concept has gone within 12 months or so from something that sounded truly exciting, you know, big hubs around big compute with lots of experts, to something that will basically create 40 FTE, 40, for 3 years in maybe 10, 12, 15, 20 places in Europe. And that compute, I can tell you because I'm in close contact with quite a few people who are applying for this, that compute isn't even 100% designed and will not even be used 100% for AI, but will also be used for scientific computing. Nothing wrong with that, by the way, but it just shows we're not serious. We're not serious about AI regulation, about AI innovation. Maybe we're serious about regulation, but we're on track of maybe being able to regulating technology that is developed and controlled elsewhere for the benefit of companies controlled, to just put it very bluntly, by the Trump administration, at least for the next 4 years, and who knows what's going to come after that, right? I think it's a frightening aspect, and I've heard nothing from any of you three that makes me less worried about it. I'm very sorry.
So, I will first go to Marina and say, okay, so you were a little bit critical also about the AI Act. What have we done wrong? Should we develop a AI policy, more industrial policy for Europe? Is that something that is needed in the context of innovation, or do you think we should amend the AI Act? Are you happy with the situation? I mean, what is your answer to basically to what was just presented?
Well, I think that if I hear closely to Holger, yes, we need maybe not to put the AI Act in the garbage, as you said, Gregory, but maybe to add different inputs in that regulation. So there is a question of the, I would say, the business part of the regulation. It's not the point I would like to discuss on my side, because it's the part I know the least. But the point I see that are clearly missing in the AI Act is the political and the societal dimension of AI system. And in fact, it's basically what we have been discussing since the beginning of this conference. Of course, the example of what next with Trump's administration and so on, this makes us think clearly about the potential consequences. But there are other points, other issues to address. For instance, we should also think about how social media have affected the way democracy, the way public debates operate. And it is something that is totally out of the scope of the legislation, of the regulation. It's very easy for me to say that, of course, and if I was a text writer at the European Commission, it just would be awful, of course, to tackle this issue and to think about a relevant legal framework to take into account this aspect. This is why I said previously that we have to think proactively, that is to say that for now we are under the impression that technologies go first and then we step aside, we look at what has been done, and then we said, well, we have to regulate the algorithmic biases, we have to regulate algorithmic filters, and so on. But the fact is, in a way, it's too late. So the main challenges, but sorry, Gregory, because I just say the critics, and I have no answers, so in a way it's null and void, but how thinking about that proactively.
So maybe going back to Martin, regarding innovation, so you are working, very concretely with grassroots groups that wants to do experimentation, etc. What is the perspective that public administrations and companies have regarding regulatory sandboxing and how much the kind of legal innovation from the European Union supports the innovation? Because that's the core of the kind of instruments that of the regulatory sandboxing instruments.
Yes, well, let's say that for the moment, a lot of companies are basically just unaware of the existence of AI regulatory sandboxes and still exploring about what can we do with it. Usually I draw the parallel with the AI Act and the GDPR implementation, where within the 2 first years, it was not about refining GDPR, but about just understanding what needs to be done and how that needs to be implemented for companies. So I think that's mainly what, for the moment, those companies are looking at. The same can be said also about the public administrations. For example, in Belgium, it's mostly for innovation on the more regional level. But how do you make the link between an organization that needs to be on a national level, such as regulatory sandboxes, with the market surveillance authorities, but still have the local connection? And that's actually something that's more difficult to put in place, depending on where you do it in member states.
Coming back to you regarding this, what was discussed so far. So what is your idea regarding these 2 questions? The one is, okay, we have already what we have. What should be added, or what is the idea that we should implement in order to foster innovation? And secondly, how can we support trustworthy AI while not having some kind of regulatory capture by actors that are already there? Because that's also a question that was not bring in the discussion so far, but it's a very important one. We know that regulation most of the time create more burden for the new entrants. We have a lot of technical standards that are not prepared. It was on your slide. And when you look at the meeting of the groups that are preparing the technical standards for trustworthy AI, it's sponsored by Amazon. Is that a way to promote the European values, or in fact, are we helping the leaders to keep the leading role in the economy?
Yeah. So first again, I'm not expressing any official views of the European Commission, but it is my view that that Holger has been very kind of vocal. First about this CERN for AI, and I hear it also kind of being discussed, in policy circles now. So I think, that the work that has been done, by the scientific community over the last few years, I think, it has a clear, at least, impact on the discussion that is currently ongoing, and there are now also. At least, you could see that also from the hearings of the commissioners. There is a discussion of the European Artificial Intelligence Research Council to some extent. But what that means in practice, honestly, I have not really been able to understand. But Virkunen also said that she wants to cut down, these by 20% or something along those lines. This burden for compliance for companies, etc., to all these various regulations. And then to address your question as well, the AI Act does not tackle everything. And for these social media companies, the Digital Services Act, with these very large online platforms, LOPs, is also kind of relevant. And I would say that there has been now sent requests for information to a range of these companies as well. And I also know that colleagues elsewhere are kind of working to tackle this type of questions. I mean, will that solve thing right now? It takes time as well for governance to kick in. And it's not something that a lot of states around the world are used to governing AI, But I would say that, for example, for the sandboxes, it is free for small, startups and small and medium-sized enterprises to enter. The mandatory horizontal sandbox that will be made in each member state or joint sandbox by the 2nd of August 2026, it is free for startups and SMEs to participate. And it also explicitly says in the AI Act that there will be at least some help from the Commission as well to reduce this compliance burden for startups and small, medium-sized enterprises. So that kind of is also a work item that we have internally over the coming years for sure. And there are other measures in support of innovation, and the one that is in that section, measures for support of innovation as well, also relates to purchasing, And I would also say that it is a really important process for these sandboxes to have these exit reports. So we have some also evidence-based understanding and regulatory learning, because without regulatory learning, regulatory capture as well is fairly simple. If you don't have the competencies in these supervisory authorities and the regulatory bodies that are supposed to protect us as citizens to form these, AI systems, then and also, like, if we have AI systems that actually could work fairly well, and that you see there is a good amount of empirical evidence for implementing them, then you have a good case for implementing certain kinds of AI in different places in Europe. But I also agree that we should think about buying local, And I think that was a really interesting argument, Like I'm from Norway, so in Norwegian radio we have this like percentage of Norwegian music, I know that's not like a good example, but we should really think about AI in terms of buying local as well, because like we have a really a grassroots like amount of really amazing companies and a lot of really incredible research that's going on in Europe. So we should think about that. We should support it, We should 100% support it. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask if there is any question. Yes, I can see already 2 hands there.
Hello. So back in the day, there was this joke where they said, how many managers do you need to change a light bulb? How many regulators or AI regulators do we need to make an AI tool these days? So my question is, and it's basically when I look at the AI European office, is this just not another office of which we already have a lot of them going on institutional levels, national level, European level? And you said, Alex, it's important to ask questions. What question shall we ask? Yes, it's important to ask questions, but don't we need to start giving answers to those questions? So my question to you is, what is the first question what is the first answer that the European AI office will provide to, which is in order for you, the most important question on the AI level?
Thank you. Maybe we can take 2 more and then have another tour.
Hello, thank you so much. Unfortunately, I do not have a joke to begin my question with, but I am curious, perhaps this is best suited for Marina, but happy to hear the thoughts of the panel on this. So we've just welcomed a new product liability directive, which of course extends itself to AI systems, but I am curious to hear how you think if this is sufficient with this reoccurring theme of protecting users, protecting citizens against the risks of AI, and whether we still need an AI liability directive, and if so, what is absolutely necessary in such a directive going forward. Thank you.
And the last one there.
Hi. I have a question from the cost perspective. Of course, local is good, but as we know, fruits grown by local farmers cost a bit more than the supermarket. So companies try to buy cheap, get a return of investment, or at least try to. How do you plan to bringing those companies to buy local? Thank you.
Okay, last question, and then we come back here.
Thank you very much to all the panelists. So my question would be mostly for Professor Oz. You mentioned two objectives: to be a leader, one of the three leaders on AI, and being the leader on trustworthy AI. Are these two objectives compatible? Because we move at a speed that trustworthy AI means high quality assurance, and high quality assurance, it means cost and time. So is it compatible? Thank you.
Okay, so I think we have quite questions for everybody. Questions regarding what's the first answer? What about liability? What about, basically I think there is a connection between the two last one. What's the link between innovation and trustworthy? Can we be innovative and ready to go to the market? Having a pricing that is acceptable for a trustworthy AI that is local. So maybe we can go to like this one, starting with you.
Yeah, so let's start with the last one. I think this is very compatible, right? In Europe, we have a long tradition of emphasizing systems, technical systems that are trustworthy, reliable, safe, and as of late also sustainable, right? And we are actually quite world leading when it comes, for instance, to production, but also we're now world leading in aviation, in commercial aviation, right? We still build the best cars, arguably, in Europe, even the best EVs, at least some of the German car makers would claim. So we can do these things, right? The thing about AI is, if we just move fast and break things like US companies, and actually not all of them, are currently proposing and pursuing, there will be a price to pay. And these companies will pay the price as well, right? This is exactly like other crappy machinery. It will let people down, it will cause damage, economic damage, it will induce liability, and there will be a demand for other kinds of technology, and we should be ready to service this demand. Exactly like we did with aviation, right? When Airbus was created, everybody thought we were crazy to try and compete with the Americans. Look where we are today. We're leading. We're leading quite comfortable. And you know, if I step on a plane, I'm not sure about you, but I look at the little tag in the door and I look what kind of a plane it is. And you know, I'm not quite, if it's Boeing, I'm not going, not quite that bad, but I certainly feel safer in a European-made plane, right? And that is because manufacturing ethos has declined in the United States. And under a government efficiency czar, Elon Musk, it will decline further. These guys are doing amazing things, but these amazing things come at a cost. And I don't think we in Europe want to pay that kind of a cost. Let the Americans and others do that. Let us do the things that we know are important for us, that we can do well. And let's find other people around the world, you know, the Australians, the Canadians, and others, who appreciate the kind of safe, reliable, and sustainable products we can make in Europe. That holds for AI and for everything else, except that everything else increasingly relies on the right kind of AI in order to have any meaningful leadership. So I think we just need to decide that we want to go and do this, put resources into it, and then of course we can do it.
Okay. Thank you. Including with Volkswagen scandal and this kind of thing. I just wanted to mention. So what do you bring on? You want to jump in, please?
Yeah, no, I just think the kind of like the Boeing door is like an excellent example. You know, I think it is the case that we really have to kind of make sure that we maintain this trust, and I think European companies are some of the most trustworthy in the world in a lot of areas, and I think that is a clear strength. But can we manage to get something like an Airbus for the field of AI? I mean, to what extent we can do that, and how we are going to do that? Those are like I think really important question that we really have to work hard to address, and I think I really like this reminder as well. You know, that we have to do it, and do suggest also like ways to do it. And as you said, compute. You mentioned compute earlier, and like how we structure compute now, how we make it available, how we work on that on European level. I think is fairly consequential. And you know, there is a lot of decisions that will be made going forward on this, although like it's not as exciting when something kind of gets announced and then it turns into like these governance policy processes. It's in the nitty-gritty of that as well that we really need those voices to remain active. Is something I would also like say. But what is the, question? I'm just jumping in there to answer that quickly before you can go to Martin, sorry. But like one of the first questions that are being answered is, as I mentioned as well, like governance on a national level across Europe. So in a sense, like, you know, the 2nd of November, different member states had to say kind of what fundamental rights, where do they kind of want to manage fundamental rights related to AI? I mean, that's quite an important question to work on. And I'm not saying it's answered like definitively, because like AI governance is something that will develop a lot over the coming years. But another question that we're working to answer internally as well is this question of prohibitions, right? And you probably saw my kind of timeline, deadline by the 2nd of February next year, around that time. At least there should be some clear discussion of like what do we not think is okay in Europe, you know? And I do think that is an important discussion, and I think that is an important question. And I think that is like an underlying question for the AI Act, so how we manage to handle that, you know? And is it going to be perfect? You know, I don't think necessarily it will be, but like, should we still continue to work on that question? I think we should. So kind of those are one of the kind of underlying things, right? That it kind of delineates the discussion of what European AI should and shouldn't be.
Martin?
Yes, I wanted to give an answer basically to a couple of the questions that were mentioned. So the first one is about the cost of doing trustworthy and, to be honest, to me actually, better AI. I think that if you compare that, and a lot of people that I've been speaking with, usually when they say they want to innovate and to build a company, they want to go to the US because there is more money available and it's easier to do. However, whenever you want to actually buy a solution that you want to trust, usually then you go European. And that's actually where the added value of what you're doing here is, really actually strikes. Second point also is that we see a lot of stuff coming out of the US, which is really like a lot of powder, really shiny, but the actual groundwork of making it scalable and making it repeatable is usually then coming from smaller companies that take the technology, the initial technology initially, and then make it better. Parallel that we had in the morning session in Studio 5 was that if you look at those big LLMs, they can be very, very good at what they're doing, but if you have a specific problem that you want to solve, then you actually go toward SLM that are then now locally developed in Europe, where you have a specific problem for which you take your LLM, you train it on your problem, and then it even becomes better and actually more sustainable also. So I think that there is a difference that we need to see between going fast forward and then having the advantage of the others have already fallen. We are coming afterwards, we can learn from that, and we can be more efficient the way we actually spend our resources.
And then Marina, the last words from this panel.
Yes, thank you, Gregory. It's an excellent question, in fact. And it's also why it's so difficult to assess all the consequences of the regulation, because we have different pieces of regulation that are not necessarily been necessarily designed to tackle the issue of AI system, but that will have to be implemented in the same times. Your question was, is it safer with regulation for the citizen, with the AI Act and the Liability Directive and so on? So I'm afraid maybe I'm a little bit pessimistic, but I'm not sure that it will be enough, in the sense that the scope of the regulation, sometimes they overlap, or in other situations they miss the point. And in the both cases, the AI Act and the Liability Directive, the focus is on the product and the liability linked with the harm due to the product. But there is another part of the difficulty in your question, is the fact that for actors and for AI providers and AI deployers, there is also a situation of risk and uncertainty due to the definition of categories in the text. For instance, I'm sure you know that the AI Act
release definition of who is a deployer, who is a provider, and so on. But basically, in reality, it is not that simple. And for instance, if a company is considered as a deployer, but if this company fine-tune a model with its own private data, to a certain extent, this provider could this deployer could become a provider. And of course, that changes the game. That means also that there is a huge legal uncertainty because actors themselves are not totally aware of what kind of regulations they have to comply with. So we are just, from the regulation part, we are just at the beginning of a long journey in AI.
Thank you very much, Marina. There is a kind, I think, more a remark regarding innovation from someone from the European Innovation Council who is in the room.
So, hello everyone. I will not take the time for the break, but just to raise awareness that the Commission is not only focusing on the regulation, also there is a commitment on the innovation side through the European Innovation Council with a very ambitious program, let's say that. And I want also to reassure that we are baking really champions in AI in Europe. And I will invite you to have a look on our work program and invite you to participate with that, with us and apply for our programs. We'll be there to help you and support building European, made in Europe AI champions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So to conclude this panel, thank you very much to all the panelists. I think it was a very good discussion. There is a lot of ambition. There is a lot of rules. There are a lot of policies. And we don't know if we will make it or not. I think that is, to a certain extent, the conclusion so far. So let's experiment and maybe continue the discussion also with the different stakeholders in order to find the European journey to AI. Thank you to everyone, and good afternoon.